The Chicago Blackhawks upset the Minnesota Wild and send Andreas Athanasiou to the minor leagues.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. Be sure to go and hit that like button, comment down below, and most importantly, to subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. Really closing in on my goal of 2,000 subscribers, but won't be able to accomplish that without your help. So thank you all very much. And last but certainly not least, got to let you all know that today's episode is sponsored by Game Time. If you haven't already downloaded the app, be sure to go and do so. Create an account and use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps to get $20 off to the sporting events, concerts, or theater events near you. All right, good morning, everyone. Again, thank you all for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. Feels good to be back here on the show. Apologies for not getting an episode out these last couple of days. As I'm sure you all can tell by the sounds of my voice, I have been really under the weather these last couple of days. Barely could even talk, and I figured it wouldn't be good for you all to listen to someone who sounds like a dying cat for 30 minutes on the show, and still kind of sound like that today, unfortunately, but definitely had to get an episode out today with everything that's been going down around the Blackhawks. We got a lot on tap for today's show. Fortunately, though, the Blackhawks have this 3-day hiatus here early on in the week, so I didn't miss any game action or anything to talk about here on the show. But to open things up today, I definitely wanted to talk for a couple of minutes about the Blackhawks' 2-1 overtime victory to get a much-needed 2 points over the Minnesota Wild on Sunday night. Big-time response from the Hawks after a pair of pretty disappointing losses in their midweek back-to-back against the Dallas Stars and the Detroit Red Wings. Felt like they had an opportunity to return from that 5-game road trip with some momentum, completely failed to do that. But then, as they return to home ice, a big-time win over the Wild, the team that they have really, really struggled against the last 3 to 4 years. This was the Blackhawks' first regular season win against the Wild since 2019. They went throughout Dean Evason's tenure as the Wild head coach without ever beating them. And I believe, including preseason games, the Blackhawks had lost 19 or 20 in a row to the Wild. So big to go and get a victory over them. It had been far too long. Big to just get back in the W column and move that record to 6-9-1. Nice through the opening 16 games here. And big to get a W on home ice. After the Blackhawks had beaten the San Jose Sharks in their home opener, they had 4 consecutive losses at home. And in order for this team to take that next step this year, they have to be better on home ice. So good to see them take advantage of that and get a big-time 2 points on Sunday night at the UC. Jason Dickinson kicked off the scoring for the Blackhawks to put them ahead 1-0 after the opening 20 minutes. The certified goal scorer hasn't really lived up to that role here after a 20-goal performance last season, as this was just his second goal of the season. Feels like that certified goal scorer title has been passed on to Ryan Donato now this season. But Dickinson, of course, plays such a pivotal role for this Blackhawks defense, which I'll get into here in just a second. Rather consistent night in and night out. So good to see him get rewarded with his second tally of the season. And the Blackhawks actually, thanks to some really solid defense, managed to hold on to that 1-0 lead going into the third period. Minnesota managed to tie it up, though, with just over 4 minutes left as Matt Boldy scored what really felt like a heartbreaker at that time. Blackhawks did a lot of good things in that game, but ended up going into overtime. Fortunately, Philip Kurashev was Johnny on the spot. It's been a start filled with struggles for number 23. So, that had to feel good for him to go up in crunch time and come up in the clutch with his third goal of the season, lifting the Blackhawks to a 2-1 win in overtime. Again, just their second home win of the season. Hopefully that gets some momentum going as they are about to head out west, if you can believe it again. Feels like the Blackhawks this is their third significant road trip, I feel like, of the season already. It's been crazy, but they're going to have more home games in the month of December and moving forward in the back half of the year. So hopefully this establishes some good momentum for this team at the UC. As far as what went right for the Blackhawks, though, in this game, number one was undoubtedly Peter Mrazek and goaltending, whether it is Mrazek or even Arvid Soderblom, who I don't think anyone anticipated would have gotten off to this good of a start with Laurent Brossoit still being out. Soderblom has been pretty spectacular as the Blackhawks backup, and Peter Mrazek, more times than not as the starter, has been marvelous. The Blackhawks have really leaned on goaltending here through their first 16 games. Mrazek on Sunday stopped 32 of the 33 shots that he faced for his fifth win of the year, responsible for 5 of the Blackhawks' 6 team wins, and he now has a 2.85 goals against and 905 save percentage so far this season, which kind of similar to Peter Mrazek's numbers the last couple of years here in Chicago. Probably don't do how good he's been playing justice when you just go and look at those numbers. However, what I did think was interesting when diving into Peter Mrazek's numbers is that in 4 of the 5 wins that he's responsible for this year, he's got a .923 save percentage in 4 of those 5 wins. So when the Blackhawks win, that usually means that Peter Mrazek was outstanding. And when he's not up to his A game, that usually gives the Blackhawks a minimal chance to win. Big night out of Peter Mrazek. Good to see him get rewarded with his 5th win of the season. What also went right for the Blackhawks is, for the most part, they kept Kirill Kaprizov relatively quiet. And that is a tough task considering he's been one of the leading point scorers in the NHL this year. Since he stepped onto the NHL scene, he's been a point-per-game guy, one of the biggest stars in the entire league. And for the Blackhawks to hold him relatively quiet was really, really impressive. He was up against Alex Vlasic and Connor Murphy for a majority of this game, 2 of the highest game score impact chart players for the Blackhawks in this win. They were phenomenal, and looking at all of the analytics, the Blackhawks were favored in every category: shot attempts, shots on goal, scoring chances for, and high danger chances when Kirill Kaprizov was on the ice. That is certainly noteworthy. Now, he did go on to pick up an assist on Matt Boldy's goal, but quite honestly, giving up 1 point to Kirill Kaprizov, it was kind of similar to what I said about Patrick Kane and Alex DeBrincat going into that game against the Red Wings last week. We kind of expect them to get their one, but don't let them go crazy. Don't let them have a big multi-point night, and that's exactly what the Blackhawks prevented Kirill Kaprizov from doing. If you just ask Blackhawks fans out there, if the Blackhawks won this game against the Wild, what do you think Kirill Kaprizov did? You definitely would say he didn't go absolutely crazy. So good on the Blackhawks for holding him down. Also, what went right for the Blackhawks is not only did they have a strong opening 20 minutes, but they had a strong opening 40 minutes. Still probably not the consistent 60-minute effort we're looking for that's been eluding this team for most of the season, as Minnesota was absolutely dominant in the third period when they started to play with some desperation and were trailing by a goal there. But the first and second periods for the Blackhawks were awesome. Now, it wasn't awesome to watch. It was very, very boring. And even though I wasn't live tweeting because I was sick, I was still following along watching the game. And it was a snoozer through these opening 40 minutes. 1-0 for the Blackhawks through 2 periods. But that's kind of the style that benefits them because they lack that star power and elite skill on the offensive side of things outside of Connor Bedard. Boring is good for this Blackhawks team. They need to get back to playing more of that boring style of hockey, as painful as it is for some of us fans. But in the opening 40 minutes against the Wild, the Blackhawks led 26-25 in shots on goal, 26-25, in shot attempts, 14-10 in shots on goal, 8-6 in scoring chances, and 3-1 in high danger chances. All of those numbers were at even strength. So boring is good for the Chicago Blackhawks. Last but certainly not least, what went right? Hawks penalty kill went 3 for 3. The power play has been struggling here over these last couple of weeks, but the penalty kill, it hasn't been the most consistent, but it's been a strong part of the Blackhawks game so far here in the season. Hawks are now 18th in the NHL in the penalty kill. I do think they have the ability to be right there in the middle half of the league in both special teams units. The penalty kill has been the better of the 2 units so far, and quite honestly, the penalty kill, I think, is going to be the more focal point of this Blackhawks team, considering, again, they lack that elite star power offensively. They can be a really strong penalty kill and get 3-for-3 efforts like they did against Minnesota on Sunday. That definitely is going to go a long way in terms of their chances of winning. All right, there are my quick thoughts on the Blackhawks' impressive 2-1 win over the Minnesota Wild to snap a long-standing losing streak against their Central Division rival. Coming up in just a moment here, Blackhawks fans, I'm going to get into Andreas Athanasiou being placed on waivers and sent to the Rockford IceHogs. But first, I got to talk to you all about Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. And Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way for you to now play daily fantasy sports, because all you got to do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections and watch the winnings roll in. Do you think Connor Bedard will get more than 0.5 goals in the next game against Seattle? Or do you think the Blackhawks will score more than 3.5 goals as a team? You can now cook up hot takes with your friends and win real money this hockey season when you and your crew run your game with Prize Picks. And one thing that I like about Prize Picks, it's the only real daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy, so that your plays stay in play even if a player was to go down with an injury. So be sure to go and download the Prize Picks app and use the code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps to get $50 instantly when you play $5. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNHL on Prize Picks to get $50 when you put $5 down. Prize Picks, run your game. I also got to talk to you all about Game Time. Hockey season has taken over, and boy, does it feel good to get back down at the United Center. And I'm sure many of you who are listening to this or watching this right now feel the exact same way that I did about getting back to the UC, and that's why I got to talk to you all about Game Time. And Game Time has a new feature that they've created called Game Time Picks, which makes getting tickets to your favorite live events, not just hockey games, even easier. And I personally have used Game Time for probably over 10 years now at this point. Whenever I'm purchasing a ticket, whether I'm going down to the United Center to see the Blackhawks, going to Wrigley Field to see a Cubs game, or I'm going to see any team or any type of event, comedy event, theater event in any city. It's the fastest, cheapest, and easiest way for you to purchase your tickets. Plus, I love how they provide views from every seat in the venue so you know exactly what to expect before you arrive and before you make your purchase. I highly recommend you all go and download the Game Time app, and when you do, create an account and use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps for $20 off with your first purchase. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps when you go and download the Game Time app. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Game Time. Back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Just wanted to say thank you to everyone for making Locked On Blackhawks your very first listen, here to start off your day. Even though it has been a couple of days since I posted an episode, been battling a little bit of an illness, so I appreciate everyone having patience. But for your second listen of the day, make sure to go and check out the Locked On Fantasy Hockey podcast so that you can become a fantasy hockey expert and get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Steal and Flip. And you can go and find the Locked On Fantasy Hockey podcast down in the description, or simply search on YouTube and wherever you may be listening to your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Segment 2. Andreas Athanasiou, Blackhawks fans, who has only appeared in 5 of the team's opening 16 games this year, was officially placed on waivers by the Blackhawks on yesterday, which was a little bit of a surprising move, but considering he hasn't played in so long, I believe it's almost been a month now. October 22nd against Vancouver, I believe, is the last time that AA got in the lineup. He clearly isn't trusted by head coach Luke Richardson, and also doesn't really have like a clear spot in the lineup. Even if Richardson were to put him back in there for a game, down on the fourth line doesn't necessarily fit Athanasiou's strengths, as defensively he is very deficient there, and even on the offensive side of things, putting him in the top 6, can't really put him on the wing because of the guys we have there already. The center ice position isn't where he naturally plays, even though that's where the Blackhawks have put him these last couple of years. That left Andreas Athanasiou in a really tough spot, and ultimately the Blackhawks made the decision that they were going to risk losing him potentially by sending him through waivers to get him down to the AHL to get in some game action. And I'm sure it was a very disappointing piece of news for Athanasiou, who's been an NHLer for a long, long time now. And of course, just a couple of years ago was, I don't want to say, excuse me, you all get a little bit of a taste of the dry cough I'm dealing with. It's absolutely awful. I don't want to say he was like a focal point of this Blackhawks team, but he kind of was, and technically was their leading scorer after they traded Patrick Kane and Max Domi in 2022-2023. Played really well down the stretch to reach 20 goals and 20 assists for 40 points. A couple of big upsets for the Blackhawks late in that season where Athanasiou was a focal part of it, and because of the way that he played down the stretch, general manager Kyle Davidson rewarded him with a 2-year contract at $4.5 million. And ever since signing that contract, things have gone pretty horrible for Athanasiou. He missed most of last year due to a groin injury. He was out from like November to March. And even when he did return, kind of looked like a shell of himself. And now this year has only been able to get in 5 games. And after coming off of a groin injury, which speed has always been his best weapon, he's getting older and into his 30s. Like, it's been tough for Andreas Athanasiou, and all those things that I just mentioned are a reason why he didn't get claimed by another team on waivers. That $4.5 million AAV that he's due through the end of this year, plus not even being able to crack this Blackhawks lineup, the age, the groin history, all of those reasons were why no team was willing to take a chance on Andreas Athanasiou at $4.25 million. And I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, I brought up possibly the Blackhawks considering trading Andreas Athanasiou. I mentioned it was very unlikely that it was going to happen because of all those things I just outlined. And obviously, if teams weren't willing to take him on for free, they weren't going to give up anything in the trade market. So Kyle Davidson really had no option here with Athanasiou. And even though I'm sure it was a tough pill to swallow for him, I think you'd rather have him getting game action down in Rockford, hopefully find something down there. And this now allows Frank Nazar the opportunity to play with an NHL caliber-ish type of guy down there in Rockford. And I know what everyone is thinking when they see Athanasiou get sent down to Rockford and clear waivers. Well, now the Blackhawks are only carrying 13 forwards on their active roster. This opens up a spot for Frank Nazar to get called up. And Blackhawks fans, I do think that's going to happen sometime sooner rather than later. I've been mentioning it on the show for probably a month now that I believe Frank Nazar will be up before the end of November and at the very least a week or two into December. If he's able to keep up the play that he's on right now, I fully expect that to be the case. However, I don't think it's going to happen right here, right now, because, well, quite honestly, the 13 forwards that Luke Richardson has left on the active roster are the 13 forwards he kind of wants to roll with at this point in time, right? Andreas Athanasiou didn't really have a lane to get back into the Blackhawks lineup because these 13 were the 13 that Luke trusts. And while there is that open spot and the Blackhawks could call someone up if they wanted to, there isn't necessarily the need for it unless someone were to get injured. So quite honestly, I expect them to give Andreas Athanasiou some opportunities along with Frank Nazar potentially and on the power play down there to give him some, again, NHL caliber-ish line mates, see how he fares with someone like Athanasiou, and then maybe in a couple of weeks down the road, we see Frank Nazar get called up to the NHL level. I fully expect that to be the case. Just got to be a little patient in terms of seeing Frank the Tank up at the NHL level. It's coming, Blackhawks fans. Don't think it's going to happen right now, but I fully expect it to come before the end of the month of December. All right, there are my thoughts on Andreas Athanasiou being in between a rock and a hard place a little bit and getting reassigned to the Rockford IceHogs of the AHL. I do have a quick update. As of the time of this recording, the IceHogs randomly had a 10 a.m. Central Time puck drop this morning. Andreas Athanasiou scored a goal 28 seconds into the game, which I thought was absolutely hilarious. But that's what you want to see out of him. Some good play, some good effort in game action. And who knows, maybe he gets recalled along with Frank Nazar. Maybe he gets called up down the road too and looks like a different player. Can't hurt to give him some game reps when that wasn't an option at the NHL level with the Blackhawks. But there are my full thoughts on Andreas Athanasiou being placed on waivers and getting assigned to the Rockford IceHogs. Coming up in just a moment, before I wrap up today's episode, I do still have to get into an update on the CHSN app that's supposed to launch later on this week. But first, I got to talk to you all about the fine folks over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle NFL action in the second half of the regular season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and win $150 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. And the FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets in the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you also happen to place your bets. And for all my Chicago Bears fans out there, I'm right there with you. The times are tough. Bears take on the hated Green Bay Packers here this week, and whether you think the Bears can pull off the miracle, or if you want to fade them and bet on the Green Bay Packers to win some money on Sunday afternoon, either way, be sure to go and visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's FanDuel.com to never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. Segment 3, good news, kind of, Blackhawks fans. Jeff Agrest from the Chicago Sun-Times on Tuesday afternoon broke that CHSN is planning to launch its direct-to-consumer app this week, similar to what the Cubs have established with Marquee Network. They have give fans the opportunity to download the app and pay a $19.99 monthly subscription fee in order to watch the team. The Blackhawks and CHSN, of course, have gotten off to this disastrous start to their new network. We're in the middle of November, and still no deal has been struck with Xfinity, as both sides are still playing hardball with one another. CHSN has reached agreements with DirecTV and Fubo. And you can also, use an antenna to watch games like it's the 1970s. But it's been an absolute disastrous start for CHSN. And to not have a deal done with the biggest cable provider in Chicago and the Chicagoland area, it has been an absolute nightmare. And I know there are many Blackhawks fans who are just downright frustrated not watching this Blackhawks team kind of on the outside of their minds because they're just not on television on a nightly basis. Well, it sounds like a little bit of a solution is coming for us Blackhawks fans, although I'm really curious to hear. Everyone, jump in the comment section down below. Let me know your thoughts on CHSN rolling out an app, which, by the way, the official price has not been released yet, but it's anticipated to be somewhere right around that $19.99 marker that Marquee asks subscribers to pay over on that network. That is kind of the rough estimate for what CHSN is going to roll out. If it is $19.99, would you be willing to purchase it? Or are you unwilling to purchase an app regardless because of the standing of this team, because they don't have it on the biggest cable provider in the Chicagoland area? Go and let me know your thoughts overall on an app, whether you'd be willing to purchase it, whether you're not willing to whatsoever. I've heard mixed feedback about it thus far on social media. I threw it in one of my group chats, and one of my buddies responded immediately saying he's not going to pay an extra $19.99 to watch this awful team. And while I don't think they're quite as awful as some people think they are because they haven't been able to watch, at the end of the day, losing 10 of their first 16 games isn't exactly a bright spot. So I get where they're coming from, and I certainly wouldn't argue against it. To me, though, as someone who's been having to stream and go online, even though I did find a pretty good stream, I would be willing to pay $19.99 in order to watch the Blackhawks, but that's honestly just because it makes my job a lot easier, and I do have a job to do. So I'm very curious to everyone out there who doesn't have a job to do regarding the Chicago Blackhawks. How do you feel about the announcement that the app is coming, and also the reported $19.99 subscription fee per month? By the way, though, a little bit of good news. It does seem like progress is somewhat being made between CHSN and Xfinity as industry insiders, according to Jeff Agrest, see Xfinity placing a monthly credit to consumers' regional sports fees as a positive sign that it's coming at some point rather than just adjusting the fee on customers' bills. I quite honestly don't understand what that means, but I did want to be sure to relay that to all of you here on the show. So it does seem like some progress is being made between the two sides. I'm not, going to get my hopes up or anything, but the news of the app, I think, is at least somewhat beneficial, but very curious to hear what everyone has to say in the comment section down below. That's going to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks. As always, thank you all again for everyone for joining me. Be sure to go and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free right now, wherever you may be listening to your podcast, and to go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. That way you can get the latest episode as soon as it becomes available each and every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can go and check me out on X at Jack Bushman 2, but be sure to follow my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey. That way, you can get all of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. So until tomorrow's episode, everyone, have a great rest of your Wednesdays. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.